A pair of trembling puppies begged a stranger for help, but what happened next broke everyone. On a dark, rain-soaked night, a lonely woman pulls over to save two desperate lives, only to uncover something far darker than she ever imagined. What starts as a simple rescue spirals into a nightmare of secrets, greed, and danger, where the people claiming to save animals might be hiding the cruelest truth of all. Each step she takes to protect them pulls her deeper into a web of lies built by powerful men with everything to lose. Her courage will be tested, her life put on the line, and the innocent ones she swore to save may be the key to everything. But when mercy becomes a threat to corruption, how far will the powerful go to silence one woman who refuses to look away? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the relentless rain as Maren Whitlow gripped the steering wheel of her old Honda Civic. Lightning flashed across the darkened sky, illuminating the empty highway ahead. Each crack of thunder made her shoulders tense, matching the turmoil in her mind. 6 months. It had been 6 months since she'd exposed the financial fraud at her former workplace, the Helping Hands Foundation. 6 months since her carefully documented evidence had brought down the CEO and several board members. 6 months since she'd discovered that doing the right thing could cost everything. The memory of that final day still burned fresh, security escorting her out while colleagues turned away, refusing to meet her eyes. The whispers that followed. Troublemaker, traitor, self-righteous fool. Her phone stopped ringing. Reference calls went unreturned. In the nonprofit world, whistleblowers were treated like a contagious disease. "At least my conscience is clear," Maren muttered, though the words felt hollow against the drum of rain. Her bank account was nearly empty, and the freelance bookkeeping jobs barely covered her rent. But she couldn't have lived with herself if she'd stayed silent about the missing funds meant for children's medical care. The gas gauge needle hovered near empty, forcing her to pull into a dimly lit station just off the highway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she stepped out into the downpour, her worn boots splashing in puddles while she filled the tank. That's when she heard it. A faint whimper cutting through the storm's white noise. Maren turned, her sharp gray eyes scanning the shadows. There, near the station's dumpster, 2 small shapes huddled together, trembling. "Oh my goodness," she breathed, crouching down slowly. 2 puppies, barely visible beneath layers of mud and grime, stared up at her with desperate eyes. One was brown with white paws, while the other was black with a torn ear. They pawed at her jeans, their cries growing more insistent. "Where did you come from, little ones?" She reached out carefully, letting them sniff her hand. The puppies didn't just want attention. They seemed to be trying to tell her something. They would run a few steps away, then return to tug at her clothes, whimpering urgently. Following her instincts, Maren grabbed her raincoat from the car and followed as they led her behind the station. Their cries grew louder, mixing with another sound, a deeper bark coming from somewhere in the darkness. The beam of her phone's flashlight cut through the rain, revealing a concrete drainage culvert partially hidden by overgrown weeds. Inside, an adult German shepherd lay on her side, surrounded by muddy water that was rising steadily. More puppies huddled against her, while she struggled weakly to keep her head above the flooding. "Hold on!" Maren called out, her heart racing. The mother dog's amber eyes met hers with an intelligence that struck deep, a silent plea for help. The water was rising faster now, churning with debris from the storm. Maren ran back to her car, hands shaking as she popped the trunk. Her emergency kit had to have something useful. She grabbed a tire iron and the cargo straps she used for hauling furniture. Time was running out. Returning to the culvert, she saw the water had risen another inch. The mother dog was fighting to stay calm, but her puppies were starting to panic. Maren took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm coming to get you," she promised, securing one end of the cargo strap to a nearby guardrail post. The other end she looped around her waist, creating a safety line. The tire iron would serve as both an anchor point and a tool to help pull them out. Maren crawled into the culvert, cold water immediately soaking through her clothes. The confined space made her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to focus on the dogs. The mother watched her approach, no longer showing any fear, as if she somehow knew Maren was their only hope. "Easy there, Mama," Maren soothed, reaching out slowly. She managed to slip the second cargo strap under the shepherd's body, creating a makeshift harness. The puppies crowded around her hands, shivering. A deep rumble of thunder shook the ground, and Maren felt the water surge. They were out of time. Using the tire iron as leverage against the culvert's wall, she began pulling the shepherd toward the opening. The dog tried to help, scrambling with what strength she had left while keeping her puppies close. "Almost there," Maren gasped, muscles burning. Water swirled around her chest now, threatening to sweep them all away. With one final heave, she managed to drag the shepherd and her pups onto higher ground, just as a wall of water rushed through the culvert. Maren collapsed onto the muddy grass, shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. The mother dog pressed against her side, offering warmth despite her own ordeal. The puppies, including the two who had found her, huddled close, their small bodies trembling. "You're safe now," Maren whispered, running gentle hands over wet fur to check for injuries. The shepherd had cuts and scrapes, and one leg seemed to pain her, but they had all survived. The reality of what to do next slowly dawned on her. Her tiny apartment didn't allow pets, and she could barely afford to feed herself. These dogs needed immediate care, warm beds, food, and medical attention. Through the rain, she spotted a sign on the highway. "Bellwether Kennels, Shelter and Adoption Center next exit." It seemed like an answer to prayer. Gathering her courage and what remained of her strength, Maren carefully helped the dogs into her car. The shepherd needed assistance, but soon they were all settled, leaving muddy paw prints on her aged upholstery. "Let's get you somewhere safe," she said, starting the engine. The two puppies who had found her sat up in the passenger seat, while their mother and siblings huddled in the back, finally allowing themselves to rest. As Maren pulled back onto the highway, following signs to Bellwether Kennels, she had no way of knowing that this act of rescue was about to pull her into something far larger than herself. For now, she was simply grateful to have been in the right place at the right time, even if her own life was in shambles. The storm continued to rage around them, but inside the car, there was a sense of peace. Sometimes, Maren reflected, the most important decisions weren't really decisions at all. They were moments when doing the right thing was the only choice that existed. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle by the time Maren pulled into Bellwether Kennels. The sprawling facility looked more like a country club than a shelter, with its manicured lawns and colonial-style buildings. A large sign proclaimed, "Where every animal finds hope," in elegant gold lettering. Maren parked near the main entrance, her old sedan looking out of place among the expensive cars in the lot. "Stay here," she told the dogs softly. "I'll get help." The lobby was warm and inviting, with plush armchairs and framed photos of happy adoption stories covering the walls. A crystal chandelier cast soft light over the marble floors. It all seemed excessive for a county shelter. "Oh my goodness," The receptionist jumped up at the sight of Marin's dripping clothes. "Are you all right?" "I found some dogs trapped in a culvert," Marin explained. "A mother and her puppies. They need help." "I'll get Mr. Bellwether right away." The receptionist hurried off through a door marked "Private." Moments later, a tall man in his mid-50s emerged. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his tailored suit spoke of wealth and influence. He carried himself with the confident air of someone used to being in charge. "I'm Cyrus Bellwether," he said, extending his hand with a practiced smile. "I understand you've brought us some new friends?" Marin shook his hand, noting how his warm expression didn't quite reach his eyes. "They're in my car. The mother's injured." "Let's take a look, shall we?" Bellwether gestured for 2 staff members to follow with a stretcher. At the car, the mother dog growled softly when Bellwether approached, but he seemed unfazed. "A beautiful shepherd mix," he commented, examining her from a safe distance. "And 4 healthy puppies. You've done a wonderful thing today, Miss Marin Whitlow. Miss Whitlow, such a good heart you have." His tone was approving, almost patronizing. "We'll take excellent care of them." The staff carefully loaded the mother onto the stretcher while gathering the puppies in a large carrier. Marin followed them into a pristine medical wing that rivaled most human hospitals. As a veterinarian examined the dogs, Bellwether kept up a steady stream of conversation about his shelter's mission. "We're the largest no-kill facility in 3 states, he explained proudly. "Every animal that comes through our doors finds a loving home." Something caught Marin's attention as the vet processed the dogs. The puppies were being fitted with brand-new tags, but when they scanned the mother for a microchip, the reader displayed corrupted data. "That's odd," Marin said. "Shouldn't the chip have clear identification?" A shadow passed over Bellwether's face, gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Technology isn't always reliable, especially after trauma. We'll sort it out." The entrance of Deputy Ward Clegg interrupted any further questions. The heavy-set law enforcement officer filled the doorway, his uniform straining slightly at the buttons. He was chewing on a toothpick, and his eyes held none of the warmth he tried to project in his smile. "Mr. Bellwether," he nodded respectfully. "Got a call about some rescued dogs?" "Ah, Deputy Clegg. Yes, Miss Whitlow here found them trapped by the storm." Bellwether's tone had shifted subtly, more businesslike. Clegg turned his attention to Marin, looking her up and down with barely concealed suspicion. "Where exactly did you find them?" Marin described the location of the culvert. As she spoke, she noticed Clegg and Bellwether exchange a quick glance. "That's county property," Clegg said. "You shouldn't have been poking around there. Could be dangerous." "They would have drowned," Marin replied firmly. "Well, no harm done this time." Clegg's smile didn't reach his eyes. "But best leave animal control matters to the professionals from now on. We wouldn't want anyone getting hurt trying to be a hero." The threat in his words was subtle but clear. Marin felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "I should go," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Will you call me when they're ready for adoption?" "Of course," Bellwether assured her smoothly. "We'll take good care of your rescues." As Marin walked to her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The excessive luxury of the facility, the corrupted microchip, the deputy's warning, and Bellwether's too perfect manner, it all added up to something that didn't quite fit. She thought of the mother dog's intelligent eyes, how the animal had trusted her completely during the rescue. Now that same dog was in Bellwether's care, and despite all the facility's polish, Marin felt she had delivered her from one danger into another. Pulling out of the parking lot, Marin glanced in her rearview mirror. Deputy Clegg stood watching her leave, still chewing his toothpick, his hand resting casually on his service weapon. The message was clear. Don't come back. Don't ask questions. But questions were already forming in Marin's mind, and she knew from experience that once she noticed something wrong, she couldn't simply look away. The cost of her last whistleblowing had been her career and reputation. Yet here she was again, facing that familiar tension between what was safe and what was right. The rain had finally stopped, but dark clouds still hung over Bellwether Kennels. As Marin drove away, she couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay behind its pristine facade, and what price she might pay for trying to find out. Morning sunlight streamed through Marin's apartment window, catching dust motes in its golden rays. The events of yesterday felt almost like a dream. The storm, the desperate rescue, and that unsettling visit to Bellwether Kennels. She stretched, joints popping as she made her way to the kitchen for coffee. A flash of white on her front door caught her eye. Her heart sank as she spotted the official-looking paper tucked into the frame. With trembling fingers, she pulled it free. Notice of citation. Illegal removal of animals from county property, she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. The fine was listed as $500, with a court date set for next month. Below the citation was a second document, this one addressed to her landlord, Roger Martinez. It detailed a formal complaint about unauthorized pet keeping and potential lease violations. Marin's stomach churned. She didn't even own any pets. "This can't be happening," she muttered, running her hand through her tangled hair. The coffee forgotten, she grabbed her phone to call Roger. He needed to know this wasn't true before. A text message from her downstairs neighbor lit up the screen. "Someone slashed your tires, all 4 of them." Marin rushed to her window. Sure enough, her reliable old Honda sat defeated in its parking spot, all 4 tires flat against the pavement. This wasn't random vandalism. This was a message. Her hands shook as she sank onto her worn couch, mind racing. The citation, the complaint, the tires. Someone wanted her scared. Someone wanted her silent. Deputy Clegg's warning echoed in her memory. We wouldn't want anyone getting hurt trying to be a hero. She needed help, but who could she trust? Her thoughts drifted to Rowan Pike, the building inspector she'd met 6 months ago during a foreclosure case. He'd seemed honest, maybe even sympathetic to her situation when she'd explained why she'd lost her job. Marin found his business card in her desk drawer, creased but still legible. Taking a deep breath, she dialed the number. "Pike here," a gruff voice answered on the 3rd ring. "Mr. Pike? This is Marin Whitlow. We met during the Cedar Street foreclosure inspections. I could really use your help with something." There was a long pause. "Miss Whitlow, the whistleblower." "Yes," she said quietly. "Something's wrong at Bellwether Kennels, and I think I'm being threatened because of it." Another pause. "Meet me at Carter's Diner in 30 minutes. Back booth." He hung up before she could respond. Marin called a ride-share service, not wanting to risk driving on her ruined tires. The driver gave her odd looks in the rearview mirror as she constantly checked to see if they were being followed. Carter's Diner was nearly empty at mid-morning. Rowan Pike sat in the furthest booth, a cup of coffee cooling in front of him. He looked exactly as she remembered, broad-shouldered and weathered, with tired blue eyes that had seen too much. "You shouldn't have called me," he said as she slid into the booth, "and you definitely shouldn't be poking around Bellwether's business." "I saved some dogs from drowning," Marin replied. "Now I've got a citation, a complaint against my landlord, and 4 slashed tires. All I did was take them to a shelter." "No," Rowan shook his head. "You took them to Bellwether's shelter. There's a difference." He glanced around the diner before leaning forward. "His reach goes deep in this county. Police, animal control, zoning board, city council, they're all in his pocket one way or another. Because of his charity work? Rowan's laugh was bitter. That's what everyone sees, the big-hearted savior of unwanted animals. Truth is more complicated. Marin pulled out her phone, showing him the photos she'd taken of the corrupted chip data. The mother dog's chip was scrambled, but they immediately put new tags on the puppies. That's not normal procedure, is it? His face darkened as he studied the images. No, it's not. He handed the phone back carefully, as if it might burn him. Listen, you need to drop this. Whatever you think you saw. I can't, Marin interrupted. I've looked away before, convinced myself it wasn't my problem. Not again? Those animals trusted me. Like your employees trusted you? His words weren't cruel, just matter of fact. Look what happened there. That's exactly why I can't ignore this. I lost everything because I spoke up about corporate fraud. If Bellwether's doing something illegal with these animals, using his charity as a cover, you'll what? Take on the most powerful man in the county? With what evidence? Marin met his gaze steadily. I'm good with numbers, Mr. Pike. Really good. Give me access to their records, and I'll find the pattern. But I need help from someone on the inside. Rowan stared into his coffee cup for a long moment. I owe Bellwether, he said finally. Years ago, when I was starting out, he helped me keep my job during a bad time. I've looked the other way ever since. And how has that felt? He flinched as if she'd struck him. Like slow poison. Then help me, Marin pressed. You're a building inspector. You have legitimate reasons to be at his facilities. All I'm asking is that you keep your eyes open, maybe take a few photos of any paperwork you see. You don't know what you're asking, Rowan warned. This goes deeper than you think. There are people who won't hesitate to do worse than slash your tires. I know exactly what I'm asking, Marin replied quietly, and exactly what it might cost. But I also know I couldn't live with myself if I walked away now. Rowan studied her face for a long moment, then pulled out his own phone. He typed briefly before showing her the screen. It displayed a messaging app she'd never heard of. Encrypted, he explained. Download it. We'll use code words. Dogs are packages. Bellwether is the bank. Never use real names or locations. He paused. I must be crazy. Thank you, Marin said simply. Don't thank me yet. He stood, leaving money for his coffee. Be careful. Watch for tails. Change up your routine. And Marin? He turned back at the last moment. If you get a warning, a real warning, run. Don't try to be brave. Just run. After he left, Marin sat in the booth for a long time, watching other customers come and go. Her coffee grew cold as she contemplated what she'd just set in motion. The last time she'd followed her conscience, it had cost her career, her savings, and most of her friends. This time felt different. More dangerous, yes, but also more vital. She thought of the mother dog's trust, of the puppy's helpless cries, of Bellwether's perfect smile that never reached his eyes, of Deputy Clegg's hand on his weapon. Her phone buzzed. A message from her landlord. Got complaint, need to talk Asipo. Another message followed, this one from the encrypted app. Inspection scheduled tomorrow. We'll keep eyes open. Stay safe. Marin took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. She couldn't go back to being the person who looked away. Whatever the cost, whatever the danger, she had to see this through. For the animals who couldn't speak for themselves. For her own soul. She left the diner into bright sunlight, already planning her next moves. She would need to document everything, build a case that couldn't be ignored. And somehow she had to stay alive long enough to bring it all to light. Marin's tiny apartment had transformed into a war room. Sticky notes covered one wall, creating a web of connections between names, dates, and dollar amounts. Her laptop glowed in the darkness, spreadsheets reflecting off her glasses as her fingers flew across the keyboard. 3 days had passed since her meeting with Rowan. 3 sleepless nights spent diving into public records, tax filings, and the murky world of animal rescue finances. Her forensic accounting skills, once used to expose corporate fraud, were now revealing something far more sinister. "Follow the money," she muttered, a mantra from her previous life. The numbers never lied, even when people did. Her phone buzzed. Another encrypted message from Rowan. "Got photos of intake forms. Sending now." The images loaded slowly. Page after page of animal intake records, each one telling a story. Marin's trained eye caught the patterns immediately. Properties in foreclosure, owners forced to surrender pets, animal control seizures, all feeding into Bellwether's operation. She cross-referenced the addresses with county records. "That's weird," she said aloud. Many of the foreclosed properties were owned by the same bank, one where Bellwether sat on the board of directors. Her phone buzzed again. "Check the timestamps on those seizure forms," Rowan wrote. Marin zoomed in. The dates didn't match the official records she'd pulled. These animals were being processed days before their owners even received notice of seizure. It wasn't just wrong, it was impossible. "They're manufacturing the rescues," she typed back, "creating the crisis before swooping in to solve it." "There's more," Rowan replied. "Watch your email." The video arrived moments later, shaky footage from Rowan's phone, taken during an inspection. It showed a training session at one of Bellwether's facilities. Workers were being instructed on how to stage dramatic rescues for social media, complete with artificial mud, tear-jerking music, and careful camera angles. Marin felt sick. She'd fallen for it herself that night in the rain. Those puppies, the mother dog, had it all been staged? Was her own rescue just another piece of their marketing campaign? She dove deeper into the financial records. Donations poured in after each viral rescue video. Merchandise sales spiked. But the real money came from the adoption fees. Premium prices for purebred dogs laundered through the system as rescues. The numbers told the story. Bellwether wasn't running a charity. He was running a sophisticated fraud operation, using people's compassion as a weapon against them. Her hands shook as she documented everything. The false paperwork trail, the inflated expenses, the shell companies hiding the real flow of money. Deputy Clegg's department provided the official stamp of approval, making it all look legitimate. Another message from Rowan. "Found something in the basement. Need to meet, not over phone." They met at midnight in a 24-hour diner 40 miles outside town. Rowan looked exhausted, his usual confident posture replaced by nervous energy. "I got into the records room during an inspection," he said quietly, sliding a USB drive across the table. "They're not just staging rescues, they're creating designer disasters." Marin plugged the drive into her laptop. Spreadsheets, photographs, internal memos, a goldmine of evidence. But what caught her eye was a series of emails between Bellwether and his staff. "Look at the timing," Rowan pointed. "They identify valuable dogs through foreclosure listings or complaints. Then Clegg's department suddenly finds health violations or neglect. The owners can't afford to fight it. Bellwether's team swoops in for the dramatic rescue, and the dogs get rehabilitated before being sold to wealthy donors." "It's not just fraud," Marin whispered. "It's extortion. They're destroying lives to create inventory." "These people trusted him," Rowan said bitterly. "They believed he was helping them. I believed it." Marin studied a particularly glossy promotional photo. Bellwether stood proudly beside a rescued show dog, its former owner in tears in the background. The caption praised his compassion. Now she saw the truth behind his practiced smile. "He's turned suffering into a business model," she said. "Every tear, every desperate situation, it's all product to him. Even the genuine cases get twisted into marketing opportunities." "What do we do with this?" Rowan asked. "Clegg's got the local authorities in his pocket. State regulators won't touch it without rock-solid proof." "We need to follow every thread," Marin replied, her accountant's mind already mapping the strategy. "Bank records, property transfers, adoption fees. Build a case so strong they can't ignore it." She paused. "But we have to be careful. These people won't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens their operation." They worked through the night, piecing together the complex web of deception. Each document revealed new layers of corruption. Bellwether had created a perfect machine, one that transformed human kindness into profit. Dawn was breaking when Marin finally looked up from her laptop. The evidence was overwhelming. Fake rescues, staged drama, laundered pets, all designed to manipulate donors' emotions and open their wallets. "We can't let this continue," she said firmly. "Too many people and animals are suffering while he plays savior." Rowan nodded, his face grim. "I'll keep gathering evidence from the inside. But watch your back. If they realize what we're doing—" "I know the risks," Marin replied. "I've lost everything once before, but this time the truth has to come out." They parted ways as the sun rose, each carrying pieces of the puzzle. Marin drove home slowly, her mind racing. The wall of sticky notes in her apartment had become a map of corruption, each connection revealing the calculated cruelty behind Bellwether's charitable facade. She thought of all the desperate people who had lost their pets to this scheme, all the donors whose compassion had been weaponized against them, all the animals treated as mere props in an elaborate performance of virtue. Her phone buzzed with another adoption success story from Bellwether Kennels. The photo showed a perfectly groomed dog with a beaming family. Once, she would have smiled at such an image. Now she saw the machinery behind it, the manufactured crisis, the forced surrender, the carefully crafted narrative of rescue and redemption. The truth had cost her everything once before. But as she added another sticky note to her wall of evidence, Marin knew she couldn't walk away. Some prices were worth paying. Some truths had to be told, no matter the cost. Marin traced her finger along the county property records spread across her kitchen table. A highlighted address caught her attention. A secondary storage facility registered to Bellwether Kennels, tucked away on the outskirts of town. "We need to inspect that shed," she said, turning to Rowan, who stood by her window, his shoulders tense. The donation records show supplies being delivered there, but no official capacity listing. Rowan ran a hand through his hair, avoiding her gaze. "Marin, I can't just walk in there without cause. Bellwether has friends in the zoning office. They'll want to know why." "You're a county inspector," she pressed. "Routine compliance check. That's all we need." He shook his head, and Marin saw something deeper than simple reluctance in his expression. "It's not that simple. 7 years ago, when the housing market crashed, I was about to lose everything. Bellwether, he made some calls, kept me employed when half the department got laid off." Marin stood, gathering the papers into a neat stack. "And now you know why. He wanted people who owed him, people he could control." Her voice softened. "But that's not who you are anymore, Rowan." "How can you be so sure?" "Because you're here, helping me, despite everything they could do to you." Rowan stared out the window for a long moment. Finally, he turned back, his jaw set with determination. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp, I'll say it's a routine structural inspection after the recent storms." The next morning dawned gray and cool. Marin parked her car a block away from the storage facility, her heart pounding as she watched Rowan's county vehicle pull up to the gate. He flashed his badge at the sleepy security guard, who waved him through without question. 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a text. "Clear. Side entrance." Marin slipped through the unlocked door, finding Rowan waiting inside. The facility was larger than she expected. Rows of metal storage units stretched into the shadows. The air held a sharp chemical smell beneath the usual kennel odors. "Something's not right," Rowan muttered, shining his flashlight along the concrete floor. "These drains are new, industrial grade." They moved deeper into the building. The sound of barking grew louder but muffled, as if coming from far away. Marin pulled out her phone, documenting everything. In the back section, they found the kennels, stacked 3 high in some places, far exceeding legal capacity limits. Many contained multiple dogs, pressed together in spaces meant for single occupants. The animals were quiet. Too quiet. "They're sedated," Marin realized, noting the glazed eyes and lolling tongues. "Look at their water bowls." Rowan checked the medical logs mounted nearby. "These records show normal dosages, but there's no way. These dogs are practically comatose." Marin photographed everything. The overcrowded cages, the drugged animals, the falsified paperwork. Her hands shook with anger, but she forced herself to be methodical. They needed evidence that would stand up to scrutiny. A soft whimper drew her attention to a lower cage. A small puppy pressed against the bars, more alert than the others. Something glinted at its neck. "Rowan, give me some light." She knelt down, examining the collar. Unlike the standard bellwether kennel tags, this one bore a tiny etched code. Letters and numbers so small she had to squint to read them. "PRT 479, she read aloud, photographing it. "Mean anything to you?" "No, but—" Rowan broke off as voices echoed from the front of the building. "Someone's coming." They slipped out through an emergency exit, hearts racing. Only when they were safely in their separate vehicles did Marin allow herself to breathe normally again. Later that afternoon, they met at the same remote diner to review their findings. Marin's laptop displayed dozens of damning photos while Rowan's official inspection report detailed multiple violations. "The sedation alone is illegal at those levels," Rowan said, spreading out printouts of the medical regulations. "Not to mention the overcrowding and sanitation issues, but that collar code bothers me. Why go to the trouble of micro-marking individual animals?" "It has to be part of their tracking system," Marin replied, pulling up her earlier financial records. "Look at these shipping manifests. The numbers don't match their reported adoption rates. They're moving dogs somewhere else, through some other channel. We need to crack that code." Rowan's voice held new conviction. "Whatever they're really doing with these animals, that tag is the key." Marin studied him across the table, seeing how far he'd come from his initial reluctance. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for helping me today. I know what it cost you. Maybe it's time I paid off old debts with something besides silence." He met her eyes. "Whatever Bellwether's done for me in the past, this is wrong, and I'm done looking the other way." They spent the next few hours organizing their evidence, creating backups, planning their next moves. The collar code remained a mystery, but they had proof now. Real, tangible proof of wrongdoing. It wasn't everything they needed, but it was a start. As the sun set, they parted ways again, each carrying copies of their findings. Marin watched Rowan's truck disappear down the highway, reflecting on how much had changed. They'd started as reluctant allies, brought together by circumstance. But standing together in that dark facility, documenting those helpless animals, something had shifted. They were partners now, bound by shared purpose and risk. The tiny coded tag sat in her pocket, its mysteries still unopened. but Marin felt the weight of it like a promise. Whatever Bellwether was hiding, wherever this evidence led them, they would follow it together. The truth demanded nothing less. Marin stood frozen in her apartment doorway, keys dangling uselessly from her trembling fingers. The door hung slightly ajar, wood splintered around the deadbolt. Inside, shadows stretched across her normally tidy living room, now transformed into chaos. Her heart pounded as she inched forward. Papers carpeted the floor like fallen leaves. Her desk drawers gaped open, contents scattered. Even the couch cushions had been slashed, stuffing spilling out in white tufts. The message was clear. Someone had been searching for something. With shaking hands, she reached for her phone to call the police. Before she could dial, heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway. "Miss Whitlow," a stern voice called out. Two uniformed officers appeared in her doorway, flashlights cutting through the dimness. "We received reports of suspicious activity. Mind if we take a look around?" Something in their tone made her pause. These weren't the same officers who'd helped her with the puppies. Their badges gleamed too brightly, their expressions too neutral. "I just got home myself," she managed. "Someone broke in?" "Ma'am, please step aside." They pushed past her, making a show of examining the damage. One officer moved directly to her kitchen cabinet, pulling it open with purpose. Inside sat an unfamiliar brown bottle she'd never seen before. Well, what do we have here?" He held up the bottle, label clearly visible. Prescription sedatives, the same kind used at Bellwether's facility. "Care to explain this?" Marin's blood ran cold. "That's not mine. Someone must have planted it." Interesting theory. The second officer was rifling through her scattered papers. "Especially given these documents about Bellwether kennels. Looks like corporate espionage to me." "Those are public records. I haven't stolen anything." But they weren't listening. Within minutes, they'd photographed everything, bagged the planted bottle as evidence, and handed her a citation for possession of controlled substances. Their parting words hung in the air like a threat. "We'll be in touch, Miss Whitlow. Don't leave town." After they left, Marin sank to the floor amid the wreckage of her home. Her laptop was gone. Her backup drives, missing. Even her phone felt compromised now. Tears of frustration burned her eyes as she realized how thoroughly they'd stripped away her evidence, her security, her ability to fight back. She couldn't stay here. They'd be watching, waiting for her next move. With trembling fingers, she typed out a text to the only person she could trust. "Need help? Can we meet?" Rowan's reply came quickly. "Garage. 20 minutes." The drive to Rowan's house felt endless. Every set of headlights made her flinch, expecting police lights to flash. When she finally pulled into his gravel driveway, her hands were cramped from gripping the steering wheel. His garage stood separate from the main house, warm light spilling from beneath the door. Inside, tools lined the walls, and a vintage motorcycle sat partially dismantled on a workbench. Rowan himself paced nervously between stacks of building plans and inspection reports. "They took everything," Marin burst out as soon as he closed the door. "The files, the photos, all of it. And they planted evidence. Prescription sedatives like the ones we found at the facility. They're trying to frame me." "Slow down." Rowan guided her to a worn armchair in the corner. "Start from the beginning." She described the break-in, the suspicious officers, the threats barely veiled as procedure. With each detail, Rowan's expression grew darker. "This is Bellwether's playbook," he said finally. "I've seen it before. He doesn't just silence people, he discredits them completely." "What are we going to do without evidence? We might still have something." Rowan moved to a locked filing cabinet, pulled out a thick folder. "Remember when I said Bellwether helped save my job years ago? There was a price for that favor, I had to look the other way on certain properties, including his North Barn facility. He spread several large thermal imaging scans across his workbench. They showed a massive structure, its interior blazing with dozens of heat signatures. I surveyed it during a routine inspection, he continued. The heat patterns showed way more bodies than his permits allowed. I'm talking hundreds of animals packed in there. But before I could file the report, I got orders from above to seal the plans. Been keeping them ever since, just in case. Marin studied the images, mind racing. These dates, they match spikes in his donation records. He was running some kind of mass operation. And hiding it well. The North Barn is officially listed as storage only. No kennel permits, no health inspections. Perfect place to move animals through without oversight. Or to hide them until they can be sold through other channels. Marin remembered the tiny coded tag they'd found. That's what those markings mean. They're tracking inventory, not rescue animals. She sank back into the chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what they'd uncovered. This is so much bigger than I thought. How many animals have they moved through there? How many people are involved? Enough to control local law enforcement, apparently. Rowan's voice was grim. And they're willing to destroy anyone who threatens to expose them. They spent hours poring over the thermal scans, cross-referencing them with what little data they'd salvaged. The North Barn facility appeared to be the hub of Bellwether's operation, far larger and more organized than the small shed they'd investigated. We need to get inside that barn, Marin said finally. These scans prove something's happening there, but we need current evidence. Photos, documents, anything that shows what they're really doing with those animals. It's heavily guarded, Rowan warned, and after tonight they'll be watching for us. Then we'll have to be smarter than them. Marin stood, new determination replacing her earlier fear. They took my evidence, invaded my home, tried to frame me as a criminal, but they didn't count on these thermal scans. Or on us working together. Rowan nodded slowly. We'll need a plan. A way to document everything without getting caught. First, we need somewhere safe to work from. I can't go back to my apartment. Stay here, Rowan offered immediately. The garage is private, and I've got security cameras covering the property. We can set up a temporary command center, figure out our next move. Marin felt tears prick her eyes at his unhesitating support. Thank you. For everything. Hey. He squeezed her shoulder gently. We're in this together now. Whatever Bellwether throws at us, we'll face it as a team. They worked late into the night, converting one corner of the garage into a makeshift office. Rowan brought down a cot from his attic, along with extra blankets and a spare laptop. It wasn't much, but it was secure, a place to regroup and plan their next steps. As Marin finally lay down to rest, she couldn't help but marvel at how quickly everything had changed. 24 hours ago, she'd been alone in her fight against Bellwether's corruption. Now she had an ally, a safe haven, and new evidence that could blow the whole operation wide open. The North Barn thermal scans sat safely locked away, their damning heat signatures a testament to hundreds of animals hidden from view. Tomorrow, they would begin planning how to expose what really happened behind those walls. But for now, surrounded by Rowan's tools and the quiet hum of his security cameras, Marin allowed herself to feel something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Marin's fingers trembled as she held the tiny collar tag under Rowan's desk lamp. The garage's shadows stretched long across the concrete floor as evening settled in. The etched markings had initially seemed random, just a series of numbers and letters. But after hours of staring at them, a pattern began to emerge. Look at this. She pointed to the first sequence. It's not just a serial number. These first 4 digits, they match the format of municipal pet licenses. Rowan leaned closer, his breath warm on her shoulder. And that second part? I think it's a date code, but encrypted. Marin grabbed her laptop, pulling up the spreadsheets she'd salvaged before the break-in. If we cross-reference these numbers with the county's public records, her fingers flew across the keyboard, matching patterns and sequences. With each correlation, her heart sank deeper. The caller's code wasn't just tracking inventory, it was telling a story, a devastating one. Oh God, her voice cracked. These are registered family pets. Look, this code matches a golden retriever reported missing 3 months ago, and this one? A prize-winning Persian cat that disappeared during its owner's eviction. She pulled up more records, the horrible truth taking shape. Bellwether's people target vulnerable owners, people facing foreclosure, medical bills, domestic disputes. They wait until the families are distracted by crisis, then the pets conveniently escape or run away. And then Bellwether's organization rescues them, Rowan finished grimly, rebrands them with heartwarming stories and resells them to new families. For premium adoption fees. Marin's voice shook with anger. These aren't strays or abused animals. They're stealing beloved pets from people already suffering, then profiting from both the tragedy and the rescue. She pulled up photo after photo, happy families with their pets, followed by desperate, missing posters. Then the same animals appeared on Bellwether's adoption website, their histories erased and replaced with manufactured tales of abandonment and redemption. The mother dog and puppies I found, Marin's throat tightened. They weren't strays. Someone's looking for them right now, thinking they ran away in the storm. Rowan's face had gone pale. He sank heavily onto a nearby stool, running a hand through his hair. I should have known. Should have said something years ago. What do you mean? He wouldn't meet her eyes. Remember how I said Bellwether helped save my job? It wasn't just the North Barn inspection. 3 years ago, I noticed irregularities in their intake paperwork. Animals coming in with clear signs of proper care, dental work, expensive collars, recent grooming. Not typical for strays or abuse cases. Marin felt ice spread through her chest. What did you do? Nothing. His voice was barely a whisper. I was 6 months behind on my mortgage. Had just gone through a divorce. Bellwether called, said he'd heard I was having trouble. Offered to help if I agreed to be more flexible with my reports. You knew. Marin stood, putting distance between them. You knew they were stealing people's pets and you just looked the other way? I told myself it wasn't my problem, that the animals were going to good homes anyway. He looked up, eyes haunted. I was a coward, and every missing pet poster I've seen since then has felt like a knife in my gut. Marin paced the garage, fury and betrayal warring in her chest. She thought of all the families who had searched for their missing pets, not knowing they'd been stolen and sold to the highest bidder. How many hearts had been broken while people like Rowan stayed silent? But beneath her anger, another emotion stirred. The same pain and shame she saw in Rowan's face. She recognized it. Hadn't she once looked the other way too? Back before, her whistleblowing days, when she'd first noticed financial discrepancies, but convinced herself it wasn't her business? She stopped pacing, forcing herself to look at him. Why are you helping me now? Because I can't live with it anymore. His voice strengthened. Because when you showed up with those photos, asking questions everyone else was afraid to ask, I saw a chance to finally do what I should have done years ago. Marin studied him for a long moment. The remorse in his eyes was genuine, and he had risked everything to help her. His job, his safety, his home. Maybe redemption was possible if you were brave enough to face your mistakes. She sat back down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Then help me make it right. All of it." Relief flooded his face. "How?" "We use the collar codes to track down the original owners. Build a database proving these animals were stolen, not rescued. Match the dates and locations to Bellwether's donation spikes." Her mind raced with possibilities. "And we find a way into that north barn. Document everything." "It won't be easy. Bellwether's built his whole empire on these fake rescue stories. People love him for it. They want to believe he's saving animals from tragedy." "That's what makes it so twisted." Marin's voice hardened. "He's not just stealing pets. He's weaponizing people's compassion, making them complicit in his schemes by manipulating their hearts." They worked through the night, decoding more collar tags and building their database of evidence. With each connection they made, the scope of Bellwether's operation became clearer and more horrifying. Hundreds of pets taken, families devastated, all to feed his profitable narrative of heroic rescue. But now they had proof. And more importantly, they had each other. Two people who had once chosen silence, now fighting together to expose the truth. As dawn began to lighten the garage windows, Marin looked at their wall of evidence. The thermal scans, the decoded tags, the matching records. They were no longer just fighting against Bellwether's corruption. They were fighting for every family who had lost a beloved pet, every donor who had been deceived, every person who believed in real compassion. The truth would hurt. But it was the only way to stop more hearts from being broken. The morning light cast long shadows across Rowan's garage as Marin spread their evidence across his workbench. Her eyes were tired from hours of staring at screens, but her mind remained sharp. The decoded collar tags had opened a door into Bellwether's operation that she couldn't close. "Look at this pattern," she said, pointing to a spreadsheet she'd created. "Every time there's a surge in rescued animals, there's a corresponding spike in donations within 48 hours. She traced the parallel lines with her finger. He times his social media posts perfectly. Heartbreaking stories of abandoned pets, complete with professional photos. Rowan leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers. Despite her lingering anger at his past silence, she couldn't deny the strength of having him beside her now. "The timing's too perfect," he agreed. "These aren't random rescues. They're staged events." Marin pulled up another document. "I've been tracking the financial transfers. Every major donation gets split 3 ways. One part to the visible shelter operations, one part to shell companies he controls, and one part—" She paused, highlighting a series of numbers. "One part goes to various county officials' personal accounts, including animal control." Rowan's voice was grim. "Clegg gets regular payments. Small enough to avoid attention, large enough to keep him loyal." She closed her laptop, rubbing her temples. "But proving the connection between stolen pets and these payments is harder. We need more than circumstantial evidence." Rowan walked to the thermal images pinned to his wall. "The North Barn might be our answer. Those heat signatures I detected. They show way more animals than his permits allow. And the building isn't up to code for housing that many." "Can we get inside?" He shook his head. "Security's tight. Cameras everywhere, restricted access. Even as a county inspector, I'd need probable cause and a warrant." Marin stood, pacing the length of the garage. Her mind raced through possibilities until suddenly she stopped. "What about during one of his rescue drops?" "What do you mean?" "According to these records, Bellwether stages major rescue operations every few weeks, big dramatic events where they supposedly save dozens of animals at once." She pulled up the shelter's social media feed. "Look, they're promoting one for next week, a raid on an alleged puppy mill." Rowan's eyes widened. "That's when they'll move the existing animals to make room for the new ones. There'll be more activity, more people coming and going." More chances to slip inside unnoticed, Marin finished. She met his gaze. We could plant cameras, document everything, get proof of how many animals they're really housing, how they're handling the turnover. It's risky, Rowan warned. If we're caught. I know. Marin's voice was steady. But think about it. Every week more pets disappear. More families search desperately while their beloved animals are being sold for profit. How many more hearts need to break before someone stops this? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. You're right. And I owe it to all those families I failed before. He moved to his tool chest and pulled out a small case. I still have some inspection equipment. Micro cameras, environmental sensors. We can modify them to run independently, hide them in the barn. They spent the next hours planning. Marin used her accounting skills to track staff schedules and security patrol patterns. Rowan drew detailed schematics of the barn's layout from memory. They identified blind spots in the camera, coverage, mapped potential entry points. The rescue operation starts at 9 in the morning, Marin said, marking their timeline. They'll need at least 2 hours to clear space for the new animals. That's our window. I can call in a routine inspection of their main facility, Rowan added. Draw attention away from the barn. Maybe even get Clegg tied up with paperwork. As they refined their plan, Marin felt a familiar tension in her chest, the same anxiety she'd experienced before exposing her former employer's fraud. But this time was different. This wasn't just about uncovering corruption. It was about protecting the innocent, both animals and the people who loved them. She looked at their wall of evidence, financial records, thermal scans, decoded tags, all pointing to a massive operation built on manufactured tragedy. Bellwether didn't just profit from suffering. He created it, manipulated it, sold it to a public eager to believe in heroes. We'll need to be careful how we release the evidence, she said. Bellwether has too many powerful friends. If we don't handle this right, it'll all get buried. Rowan nodded. I have a contact at the State Oversight Board, someone I trust. Once we have solid proof from inside the barn, we can take everything to them. And I've been building a secure database, Marin added. Everything backed up in multiple locations, with timestamps and authentication codes. They won't be able to claim it's fabricated. They worked through each detail, anticipating problems, planning contingencies. The risk was enormous. They could both lose their jobs, face legal consequences, or worse. But as Marin looked at the missing pet posters she'd collected, each representing a family's broken heart, she knew they had no choice. Whatever happens, she said quietly, we have to try. These families deserve to know the truth. Rowan met her eyes, and in his gaze she saw the same determination that burned in her heart. We'll do it right this time, he promised. No more looking away. As they finalized their preparations, Marin felt her role shifting. She was no longer just investigating corruption. She was fighting it head-on. The whistleblower was becoming a crusader, and this time she wasn't alone. They would need every ounce of courage they possessed to enter that barn next week. But with each life they could save, each family they could help reunite, every risk would be worth it. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. Thunder rolled across the darkened sky as Marin adjusted her borrowed delivery uniform. The fabric felt stiff and foreign against her skin, but it was their best chance at blending in during the chaos of preparation for tomorrow's rescue operation. These badges should get us through the first checkpoint, Rowan said quietly, handing her a laminated ID card. His usual flannel was replaced by the same brown uniform, making him look like any other supply worker. Remember, if anyone asks, we're dropping off extra kennels for tomorrow's event. Rain pelted the windshield of their unmarked van as they approached the north barn. Lightning flashed, illuminating the massive structure against the storm-dark sky. Marin's heart pounded, but her hands were steady as she checked their equipment one last time. Hidden cameras, data drives, and the modified inspection tools Rowan had prepared. "Security's lighter than usual," Rowan noted as they pulled up to the gate. "Storm's probably got them distracted." The guard barely glanced at their badges, more concerned with staying dry than scrutinizing delivery personnel. As they drove through, Marin caught sight of several other vehicles arriving, workers preparing for tomorrow's manufactured drama. They parked among other supply vans near the barn's side entrance. The storm provided perfect cover, with most staff hurrying between buildings with heads down against the rain. Marin and Rowan moved quickly, pushing a dolly loaded with empty kennels as their excuse to enter. Inside, the barn was a hive of activity. The space was enormous, far larger than it appeared from outside, with rows upon rows of kennels stretching into the shadows. The air was thick with the smell of animals and cleaning chemicals. "Over there," Rowan whispered, nodding toward a section where workers were moving crates. "They're clearing space for tomorrow's new arrivals." Marin's chest tightened as she watched them. Each crate held a dog, most eerily quiet and still. "They're sedated," she murmured, recognizing the glazed eyes and lolling heads. "Making them easier to handle during the transfer." They pushed their dolly deeper into the barn, pretending to check delivery locations while secretly planting their modified cameras in strategic spots. Marin's fingers trembled slightly as she activated each one, knowing these devices could capture the evidence they desperately needed. "Look at this," Rowan called softly. He'd found a staging area where professional lighting equipment was being set up. Promotional banners lay ready to be hung, proclaiming Bellwether's heroic rescue mission. Everything was positioned for maximum emotional impact, the perfect backdrop for tomorrow's performance. Marin pulled out her phone, disguising it as checking a delivery manifest while actually taking photos. "They've got it down to a science," she said bitterly. "Every detail planned for maximum donor appeal." Thunder crashed overhead as they worked their way through the barn. In one section, they discovered files detailing the upcoming rescue, complete with pre-written press releases and social media posts, all crafted before the operation had even begun. "These are all staged shots," Rowan said, examining a board of photo examples. "Posed scenes showing desperate conditions, then the triumphant rescue moment." "And here's the script," Marin added, quickly photographing a document. "They've planned every quote, every tearful moment. Nothing is real." They found a temporary office area where computers were set up for processing intake forms. While Rowan kept watch, Marin used her accounting expertise to access the systems. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, downloading files and uploading them to their secure cloud storage. "Got it," she whispered triumphantly. "Transfer records, medical reports, everything. This proves they're cycling animals through multiple facilities, changing their identities each time." The storm intensified outside, rain drumming on the metal roof. Lightning flashed through the high windows, casting strange shadows among the kennels. In that stark illumination, Marin saw the true scope of the operation. Hundreds of animals, all part of Bellwether's cruel profit machine. They documented everything. The sedation stations where drugs were prepared, the photo staging areas, the carefully organized paperwork that tracked each animal's fictional journey from tragedy to triumph. Every detail revealed how thoroughly Bellwether had commercialized compassion. "The files are still uploading," Marin murmured, checking her phone. The storm was affecting the signal, making the transfer painfully slow. "We need a few more minutes." Rowan nodded, continuing to watch for approaching workers. "Almost everyone's focused on the main preparation area. We should be clear for now." They found a section of newer kennels, clearly prepared for tomorrow's rescued animals. Everything was arranged for maximum dramatic effect. The before and after areas carefully configured to emphasize the transformation from despair to hope. "Look at these props," Marin said in disgust. pointing to a pile of deliberately muddied blankets and damaged food bowls. They'll place these in the before photos to make conditions look worse. Thunder boomed directly overhead as they finished placing their last hidden camera. The upload was nearly complete, each file another nail in Bellwether's coffin. Marin felt a surge of triumph as she watched the progress bar inch forward. Soon they would have irrefutable proof of the entire operation. 5 more files, she whispered. Then we'll have everything we need. Rain pounded against the roof, nearly drowning out the sound of approaching voices. Rowan tensed, touching Marin's arm in warning. They quickly resumed their delivery worker poses, adjusting empty kennels as several staff members passed nearby. "Tomorrow's going to be our biggest media event yet," one was saying. "Mr. Bellwether wants everything perfect." "The sedatives are all measured out," another replied. "Animals will be calm but alert enough to look grateful during the rescue footage." Marin's hands clenched as she listened, but she kept her face neutral, focused on the uploading files. 4 left. 3. 2. Lightning flashed again, and in that brilliant moment, she saw their victory within reach. All their evidence was nearly secured. The financial records, the staged photos, the medical documents, everything needed to expose Bellwether's elaborate scheme. One file remained. The storm raged on, but inside the barn, Marin felt a profound calm. They had done it. They had gathered the proof needed to bring down this corrupt empire built on manufactured tragedy. The final file completed its upload just as thunder shook the building. Their mission was accomplished. Now they just had to walk out as calmly as they had entered, their evidence safely stored beyond Bellwether's reach. The barn doors burst open with a thunderous crash that rivaled the storm outside. Deputy Ward Clegg stormed in, his service weapon drawn and aimed. Behind him, 4 officers followed with their guns raised, spreading out in practiced formation. "Don't move!" Clegg's voice boomed through the barn. "Hands where I can see them!" Marin's heart leapt into her throat. Their disguises hadn't fooled anyone. She raised her hands slowly, watching as Rowan did the same beside her. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating Clegg's face, his usual smirk replaced by cold fury. "Well, well," Clegg drawled, moving closer. "Looks like we caught ourselves some trespassers." He gestured to his men. "Search them." 2 officers approached, rough hands patting them down. Marin's phone was yanked away, along with Rowan's wallet and keys. She kept her eyes fixed on the deputy, refusing to show fear despite her thundering pulse. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" Clegg's voice dripped with contempt. "Had to keep poking around where you weren't wanted?" "The truth always comes out," Marin replied steadily, even as her hands trembled above her head. Clegg laughed, an ugly sound. "Truth? The only truth that matters is what we say it is." The confrontation might have ended there, with simple arrests if fate hadn't intervened. During the search, one of Clegg's men knocked into a portable heater used to warm the kennels. It toppled sideways, landing in a pile of dry hay meant for tomorrow's photo staging. The flame caught instantly. Within seconds, the hay was ablaze, fire racing along the barn floor. One of the officers shouted in alarm, backing away from the rapidly spreading flames. "Get that out," Clegg bellowed, momentarily distracted. Chaos erupted. Officers scrambled for fire extinguishers, while dogs began barking frantically in their kennels. The flames grew higher, feeding on decades-old wood and straw. Thick smoke started filling the air. In the confusion, Rowan grabbed Marin's arm, pulling her toward the exit. They'd made it halfway when a thunderous crack split the air. Part of the barn's ancient roof support gave way, sending a massive wooden beam crashing down. Rowan shoved Marin clear, but couldn't save himself. The beam caught him across the legs, pinning him to the floor. His cry of pain cut through the growing roar of the fire. "Rowan!" Marin screamed. She turned back, choking on smoke that was now rolling through the barn in heavy waves. "Get out," he yelled between coughs. "Save yourself." Clegg and his men were already retreating, more concerned with their own safety than their prisoners. Through the thickening smoke, Marin could see the barn doors standing open, offering escape. She could flee now, avoid arrest, save herself from the inferno. But that wasn't who she was. Not anymore. Marin dropped to her knees beside Rowan, grabbing the beam. "Push when I lift," she ordered, bracing herself. The wood was hot, nearly burning her hands, but she heaved with everything she had. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then Rowan managed to shift slightly, and together they created just enough space for him to drag himself free. His legs were bruised but not broken. He could walk with help, but they couldn't leave yet. All around them, dogs were howling in terror, trapped in their kennels as smoke filled the barn. The fire was spreading rapidly, eating through the dry wood and hay. "Help me," Marin coughed, already moving to the nearest kennel. Her fingers fumbled with the latch, finally prying it open. The dog inside bolted for the doors. Rowan limped to join her, working on the next cage. Together they moved as quickly as they could, freeing animals 2 by 2. The heat was becoming unbearable, the smoke so thick they could barely see. Then Marin heard it, a familiar whine cutting through the chaos. She squinted through the smoke and saw her, the shepherd from the culvert, the one whose rescue had started everything. The dog was pressing against her crate bars, eyes locked on Marin. "Hold on, girl," Marin whispered hoarsely, stumbling towards the kennel. Her lungs burned with every breath, but she wouldn't leave this dog behind. Not again. The crate was stuck, warped by the heat. Marin pulled until her muscles screamed, finally forcing it open. The shepherd leaped out, but instead of running, she stayed close to Marin's legs. "Go," Marin urged, but the dog wouldn't leave her side. Through watering eyes, she saw Rowan releasing the last few animals, all of them streaming toward the exit. The barn was becoming a death trap. Support beams groaned overhead, and the flames had climbed the walls. The heat was so intense it felt like her skin was blistering. "Marin!" Rowan called out desperately. "We have to go now!" She grabbed his arm, supporting him as they stumbled toward the doors. The shepherd led the way, as if guiding them through the smoke. Each step was agony, their lungs screaming for clean air. Behind them, another beam crashed down, sending up a shower of sparks. The fire's roar was deafening now, drowning out even the storm outside. But they kept moving, one painful step at a time. The cool night air hit them like a blessing as they finally emerged from the barn. They stumbled several yards further before collapsing onto wet grass, gulping in precious clean air. The shepherd pressed against Marin's side, whining softly. Through blurry vision, Marin saw the freed dogs gathering safely away from the burning building. Not a single one had been left behind. She reached out to touch Rowan's arm, reassuring herself he was really there, really alive. They'd done more than gather evidence tonight. They'd saved lives, animal and human alike. As sirens wailed in the distance and rain continued to fall, Marin knew that her choice to stay, to risk everything, had been the only one she could have made. The night wasn't over. There would be consequences to face. But in this moment, watching the flames consume Bellwether's house of lies, while every dog they'd freed was safe, Marin felt a fierce pride. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage came not from exposing truth, but from refusing to abandon those who needed help, no matter the cost to oneself. The flames cast wild shadows across the barn's interior as Rowan dragged himself toward the wall. His legs were shaky, but determination drove him forward. Through the smoke, he spotted what he was looking for. the old-fashioned fire alarm pull station. Without hesitation, he yanked it down hard. The shrieking alarm cut through the chaos, echoing across the property. "That'll force them to log the emergency call," he shouted to Marin over the noise. "Dispatch has to record everything now." Outside, Deputy Clegg was barking orders at his men, his face illuminated by the growing blaze. "Get those files out! All of it! Now!" His body camera bounced light off his badge as he moved, unknowingly recording every word. "Sir," one of his deputies called out, "the filing cabinet's blocked by flames." Cyrus Bellwether's voice cut through the night air, sharp with panic. "I don't care how you do it. Destroy those records before anyone else arrives." His expensive suit was covered in soot as he gestured wildly at the barn. "Everything in there needs to burn." The wail of approaching sirens made him freeze. Fire trucks were racing up the long drive, their red lights painting the scene in surreal flashes. Bellwether's mask of control crumbled completely. "You idiots!" he screamed at Clegg and his men. "This is your fault. I told you to handle those two quietly." His voice rose to a hysterical pitch. "Now it's all falling apart because you couldn't silence one worthless whistleblower." Inside the barn, Marin and Rowan were still freeing the last of the dogs. The smoke was nearly unbearable now. Through streaming eyes, Marin saw firefighters rushing toward the building in full gear. They were shouting orders, unrolling hoses. "The evidence," she gasped between coughs. "We can't let them destroy." "The body cams," Rowan wheezed back. "They're all wearing them. Everything's being recorded." Indeed, every deputy's camera was capturing the scene in perfect detail. Bellwether's incriminating orders, Clegg's desperate attempts to destroy evidence, the dozens of tagged and sedated animals fleeing the barn. The truth was being preserved in ways they couldn't erase. The shepherd dog stayed close to Marin as they guided the final animals toward safety. The heat was intense now, the roof beginning to cave in sections. Firefighters were yelling at them to get out immediately. They stumbled the last few yards to freedom just as another support beam crashed down behind them. The cool night air hit Marin's smoke-filled lungs like a physical blow. Her legs gave out, and she dropped to her knees in the wet grass. The shepherd pressed against her side, whining softly. Through blurry vision, Marin watched the barn, Bellwether's temple of deception, become fully engulfed. The flames reached toward the sky, as if nature itself was cleansing the corruption. Around them, firefighters worked to contain the blaze while police cars arrived with flashing lights. Bellwether was still shouting, his carefully crafted image crumbling with every recorded word. Clegg stood silent now, his face ashen as he watched years of corruption literally go up in smoke. "The north barn's burning down," someone yelled into a radio. "Multiple animals involved, possible arson. Need additional units and animal control." Every word, every action was being logged now, officially documented in ways that couldn't be buried or denied. The truth was, finally, fully exposed in the harsh light of emergency vehicles and the unforgiving eye of police cameras. Marin felt Rowan's hand on her shoulder, steadying her as she coughed. All around them, the freed dogs huddled in groups, safely away from the flames. Not a single one had been left behind. Through the pain in her lungs and the exhaustion in her bones, Marin felt a fierce sense of completion. The shepherd hadn't left her side, as if acknowledging the full circle of their connection. This was the same dog whose rescue had first led Marin to Bellwether's door. Now she had helped expose the truth and free all the others. Sometimes the smallest act of compassion could spark something much larger, a chain of events that could bring down an empire built on lies. The steady beep of a heart monitor pulled Marin from darkness. Her eyes fluttered open to harsh fluorescent lights and white ceiling tiles. Her throat felt like sandpaper, and the smell of smoke still clung to her hair. "Welcome back," a familiar voice said softly. Rowan sat in a chair beside her bed, his face marked with butterfly bandages and bruises. His usual flannel shirt was replaced by a hospital gown, but his tired smile was warm and genuine. "The dogs?" Marin croaked. "All safe. Animal rescue groups came from 3 counties to help." He leaned forward, wincing slightly. "But that's not even the biggest news. The footage, everything those body cameras caught, it's everywhere. They're calling it the North Barn Exposé on every major network." Marin's heart monitor quickened. "Bellwether?" "In custody, along with Clegg and 6 others. The charges are serious: fraud, animal cruelty, racketeering. The district attorney's office is having a field day with the evidence." He shook his head in amazement. "Your financial tracking gave them the paper trail they needed. Between that and the video footage, they don't stand a chance." Tears welled in Marin's smoke-irritated eyes. For years, she'd carried the weight of being branded a troublemaker, a disgraced whistleblower who'd lost everything for speaking up. Now, finally, the truth had come to light. "The local paper ran a piece about you," Rowan continued, pulling out his phone. "They're calling you the accountant who wouldn't look away. Your old cases are being reopened too. Turns out you were right about those other organizations." Marin closed her eyes, letting relief wash over her. Her name, once whispered with suspicion, now stood for something else: integrity, courage, and the power of one person's refusal to ignore wrongdoing. The courthouse buzzed with tension as Marin took the witness stand. Her gray eyes swept across the packed gallery, past the reporters with their notepads, to where Cyrus Bellwether sat in an expensive suit that couldn't hide his scowl. She straightened her simple blue blazer, a quiet contrast to his polished facade. "Please state your name for the record," the prosecutor said. "Marin Whitlow." Her voice carried clear and strong through the courtroom. For the next 2 hours, Marin methodically laid out the evidence. She explained the financial trails, the falsified records, and the staged rescues. Her accounting background helped her break down complex schemes into simple terms the jury could understand. When she described finding sedated animals in the North Barn, several jurors shook their heads in disgust. "These weren't just numbers in a ledger," Marin testified. "These were beloved pets, stolen from families who trusted the system to protect them." During cross-examination, Bellwether's lawyer tried to paint her as a disgruntled ex-employee with a vendetta against charitable organizations. But Marin remained composed, letting the evidence speak for itself. The jury took just 6 hours to return their verdict. Bellwether was found guilty on multiple felony counts: fraud, money laundering, and animal cruelty. Deputy Clegg, looking deflated in civilian clothes, lost both his badge and his pension after pleading guilty to lesser charges. Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones toward Maureen, shouting questions. She politely declined interviews, instead kneeling to greet 2 familiar faces: the mud-covered puppies she'd rescued months ago, now healthy and waggling with joy. Their mother, the shepherd, sat proudly beside Rowan, who'd been fostering them. "Thank you," she whispered to the puppies, scratching their ears. "You helped me find my voice again." Their tails thumped against the courthouse steps as justice, at last, found its way home. 6 months after the trial, morning dew sparkled on fresh grass outside the renovated Sunrise Haven Animal Sanctuary. The old Bellwether property had been transformed, its dark history replaced with hope and honest care. Clean kennels lined the sunlit yard, while happy barks echoed from the exercise area. Marin stood in her modest office, surrounded by neat stacks of financial records and framed certifications. Her new firm, Whitlow Financial Oversight, specialized in auditing charities to ensure transparency. The morning light caught the silver nameplate on her desk, a gift from her growing list of grateful clients. She grabbed her light jacket and stepped outside, where Rowan waited with 3 leashes. After leaving his inspector position, he'd found his true calling helping her rebuild the kennels. His tired eyes had brightened over the months, guilt replaced by purpose. "Ready for our morning walk?" he asked, passing her 2 of the leashes. The shepherd, now officially named Hope, trotted ahead of them, her once matted coat gleaming in the sunrise. Her 2 puppies, no longer tiny but still playful, bounded alongside her. Their muddy rescue felt like a lifetime ago. "Sometimes I can't believe how much has changed," Marin said as they walked the trail behind the sanctuary. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wildflowers. Rowan's warm hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "You changed things, Marin. You showed people that doing the right thing matters." They paused at the crest of a small hill, watching Hope and her puppies chase butterflies through the tall grass. The rising sun painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, its light touching everything with promise. Marin squeezed Rowan's hand, feeling the rightness of this moment. Her past pain had transformed into something beautiful. Not just her own healing, but a chance to protect others from similar betrayals. The sanctuary stood as proof that courage and truth could rebuild what corruption had broken. Looking at the sunrise, Marin understood that her rescue of those muddy puppies had been more than just a good deed. It had been the beginning of her own salvation, leading her back to trust, love, and purpose. Some rescues, she realized, saved both the rescuer and the rescued. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.